Good morning. Australian action to reduce greenhouse gas emissions since 1990, led by my government, will prevent about 87 million tonnes of climate-changing carbon a year entering the atmosphere by 2010. That's a massive reduction and a tangible example of the Coalition's commitment to the climate change challenge. Today I'm announcing $627 million in practical new measures to tackle global warming, bringing total spending on climate change initiatives since 1996 to about $3.4 billion. This will include $336 million for green vouchers for schools to improve energy and water efficiency. Every school in Australia will be eligible for a voucher of up to $50,000 to help install solar hot water systems and rainwater tanks. Not only will this help reduce energy use and conserve water, but it will provide students and our school communities with a first-hand lesson in how we can act locally to preserve the environment. I'll also be announcing a cap-and-trade emissions trading system that will help Australia substantially lower our domestic greenhouse gas emissions at the lowest cost. Stabilising atmospheric concentrations of greenhouse gases will be difficult, but not impossible. We do not have to sacrifice our economic prosperity to tackle the problem. Australia will more than play its part to address climate change, but we'll do it in a practical and balanced way, in full knowledge of the economic consequences for our nation. Thank you.
Bowen, what's wrong? Nothing. Oh, come on, Chris. Why don't you come kick the can down the road with me? It's our favourite thing to do. I don't want to be Energy Minister anymore. I hate this portfolio. No, come on, you're Chris Bowen, the power-hungry pig. What's gotten into you? I got beaten up by a 17-year-old, Anthony. Oh, no, Chris, where did this happen? Q&A on the ABC. Oh, that's supposed to be a safe place. Not anymore. Once this 17-year-old heard that I was chasing a net zero, he beat me up, spanked me, right there on live telly. Huh? Who's a net zero? You know a net zero, she's over there. Whoa. She's so global. Oh yeah, we got her from that Paris Agreement. Oh, she sounds so nice, but I have no idea what she means. No one does. We've got to try and meet her. I don't care what it costs. Oh, she seems so unattainable, but I'm willing to commit to her.
Not so fast, Anthony. I'm afraid to say we've already committed to a net zero.
Yeah, we're going to meet her by 2050.
Well, I could meet her tomorrow if I wanted to.
Well, not if I meet her first. Wait, you guys, she's mine. I saw her first. Hey, a net zero. Want to watch me shut down all the coal-fired power plants? That's nothing. I'll end all coal and gas right now. Green energy subsidy? I made it just for you, a net zero. Damn, she's so fickle. Annette, look, I've replaced all the plastic straws in the canteen with paper ones. Look.
Hey, Annette Zero, want to share local industry with me and my best friend China? Dearest Annette Zero, David and I would like to offer you 1 million solar panels and wind turbines.
You can put them anywhere in regional Australia if you want. So, who's it going to be, Annette Zero? Please, I need you. I love you. Please, Annette Zero. There you are, love. What? Catter? How?
You gooses. Miss Senator Hanson's been telling us for years, if you really want to get to a net zero, you have to go the nuclear option. Now, take a good hard look at yourselves and all you've done chasing a net zero. You've driven up power bills higher and higher by shutting down the most reliable source of power. You're handing out green subsidies that are just lining the pockets of billionaires. You're pandering to city elites and making the country and the suburbs pay the bill. But worst of all, these paper straws.
Yeah, I know, they suck.
No! They don't suck! That's the bloody problem! Within 2 minutes, they've gone soggy, and they don't suck anymore!
Wait a second. Where's the net zero gone?
A net zero?
Annette? Ah, I knew she was just a fantasy.
Right, good morning, everybody. Like I said, very special interview, and we have our wind turbine whistleblower here, Miss Alex Nicol, and let me just get her onto the stage. Alex, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. Hi, everybody.
Hi on X and Rumble. I think we've been chucked off Fascist Book, but that wouldn't surprise me. Alex, can you give everyone a brief description of yourself? People that have watched your interviews before know that you used to work for a couple of Liberal senators. Do you want to just expand on your introduction there for people who haven't seen you before?
Yeah, absolutely. So I worked for 2 Liberal Party senators for 8 years, and I worked on both of the Senate wind turbine inquiries. So we had 2 inquiries. One was in 2010 and one was in 2015. So I've been witness to both of those inquiries, and that was the majority of my work, was working on the inquiries, so that the farmers whose lives were being severely impacted by the wind turbines would have a voice, and so that the corruption in the industry would be investigated. Unfortunately, there was a lot of stifling that went on in those inquiries because we had a Green chair for the first one, and the second one, I can't remember who was chair. It might have actually been John Madigan, but you can imagine in a very biased bureaucratic system, it's very difficult to get all of this information out. Cool.
So I think people really don't want to hear someone like yourself speak about this, Alex, clearly.
Exactly. There's so much money involved, Robin, like it's enormous. The subsidy that we pay to wind turbines every year is $15.6 billion, and it's coming out of our electricity bills. So every pensioner, household, business, school, hospital, everyone is paying the subsidy that is paid to wind turbines. It's an enormous amount of money. The project that I would like to talk about today, which is Acciona's project, that's worth $400 million in subsidies per year to them. So nobody wants to hear me talk about it because of the amount of money that is involved. It's not that nobody wants to hear me, it's that they don't want you to hear me.
Yes. So you had sent me a couple of links a few days ago in regards to this company called Acciona, and I'd never heard of this company before. You sent me those links, and I did go along to their YouTube channel, and they have lots of wonderful promotional videos about the wonderful work they've been doing around Australia for these wind farms and communities, and helping communities and providing work and opportunities and all these sorts of things. But the article you did send me, I'll see if I can share the screen. And in particular, this is in regards to this an ABC headline. Let me just pop it up nice and big.
Yeah,
for
so
everybody.
the ABC announced that Acciona is going to be putting up a 400 turbine wind farm in Darkin, Arthur River, Wagen and Williams. Mm-hmm. And it's covering 100,000 hectares. So that is a lot of turbines. This is why it's worth $400 million approximately in subsidy per year to them. Mm-hmm. And basically, like the estimate to work on is that the company, the wind company, is getting paid $1 million per turbine in subsidy from the Australian people. And the farmer is getting paid a lease payment per turbine. Now, that was $15,000, and they do start their negotiations at $15,000 per turbine. The one in Ongerup that they want to put up is 30,000 per turbine. And I've just been speaking to a farmer who has shown me his contract, which is 75,000 per turbine was the offer. That farmer pushed them up really high before he pulled out of the contract. So whilst you would think that 75,000 would be a high payment per turbine, if the wind company is getting $1 million per turbine in subsidy alone, then they're ripping the farmers off.
I'm just going to pop a couple of maps up for people who aren't sure the area that we're talking about here for this proposed largest land-based wind farm outside of China. So here we've got Western Australia. The blue dot down there is Perth, Western Australia. And then the areas that you just mentioned there, Alex, is Collie. The Shire of West Arthur there is outlined. We've got Williams above that, Narrogin and Wagen. So it's all of that area there, pretty much.
Correct.
And as you said, it's 100,000 hectares. So that's 247,105 acres. For people that aren't familiar with hectares, so that's a huge area, and it is agricultural land.
It's enormous, Robin. It's in our prime agricultural land, and it's not the only one. There are other ones that are going to join up to that one. I don't have them in front of me right now, but I know that there are a lot of them going in. There's the one in Kojonup that's already up. That was ground zero for me because that was the subject of the first Senate wind inquiry. That's an absolute shenanigans that should never have been built. And the farmers that have come to me that are living near them are basically living in hell because of the infrasound and low frequency sound from the turbines. So there's the Flat Rocks wind farm that's already up in Kojonup. There's the one that we've just mentioned, the proposed one with Acciona. And then there are other ones as well. There was a farmer that just messaged me yesterday and said that they've been approached in Calabarin. There's also the King Rock wind farm that's proposed for Hyden. And then, as you know, Robin, we have them proposed from Geograph Bay all the way up to Kalbarri.
That's right.
So this is absolutely, our state is being invaded by foreign companies, and our state government is just selling us to them. It's absolutely disgraceful. Our state government has committed $4 billion to connecting wind turbines to the grid and $3 billion to decarbonising the grid. And the one in Scott River is with Synergy, and Synergy has $3.5 billion sitting in their account. This is state-owned. I'd like to add that this is all our money. So down in Scott River, they're fighting $10.5 billion. This is such a David and Goliath situation. And unfortunately, people in Western Australia just aren't seeing the wind industry coming. They've already destroyed the grid in South Australia, Victoria, New South Wales and Queensland. The environmental destruction is horrific. And now they're coming for Western Australia because they've already exploited the other states as much as they possibly can.
So this new wind farm that they're proposing, so just to go over the main points again, so this company, Acciona, has proposed building a 3 gigawatt wind farm across 100,000 hectares of prime agricultural land. It's reported that they want to install 400 wind turbines, which stand at 220 metres tall, which would make it the largest wind farm outside of China. And you just mentioned synergy there. One of the things that is part of the discussion is they need somebody to buy that energy. So ASEAN been talking about having to have a relationship with either Synergy or one of our other major power providers here in Western Australia. So the size, from my understanding, just briefly talking to you before we went live this morning, Alex, the size of the turbines is a new thing in this project as well. Can you talk about that?
Exactly. Yeah. So in Albany and Esperance, we had the 10 Mile wind farm, and Albany also had a wind farm, and those turbines were 600 kilowatts. So that's 0.6 of a megawatt. There wasn't problems with those turbines, A, because they were far enough away from the population, and B, because they were very small. These turbines are 6.2 megawatts. So that's over 6 times the size of those turbines that we had in Albany and Esperance. They've decommissioned the ones in Esperance, and they've now built 6 megawatt turbines down there. These ones are going to be 6.2 megawatts, and there's discussion of them being 7 megawatts in Scott River. Like, these turbines are absolutely enormous. So if you have experience with driving past like the 10 Mile wind farm in Esperance, these are going to be over 6 times the size of those original turbines, and the infrasound and low frequency noise increases with the size of the turbine. So what that means is that there is no safe distance that you can be living near these turbines. There are noise limits set by each state and each country. The noise limits do not protect your health, and there will be discussion of whether or not you're living 1 kilometre or 2 kilometres away from the turbines. Neither of those are safe distances. These vibrations, the seismic vibrations, have been measured out to 30 kilometres.
Oh.
And the size of the turbines is astronomical. And as they've told you, they haven't done this before, this size, with this amount of turbines. It will absolutely decimate our prime agricultural land.
It sounds like Western Australians, and if we think back to 4 years ago during the COVID war, Mr. Mark McGowan, our Premier, said, during the biggest third phase trial drug experiment across the world, our Premier, Mr. Mark McGowan, said Western Australians were a very compliant people in this guinea pig experiment. It sounds like to me the sheer size of these, and you've just said that this hasn't been done before. Once again, Western Australians are a guinea pig when we're talking about our health and also the environment.
Correct. Yeah, that's exactly.
Astounding.
And the fraud in the industry that I can talk about, this was with turbines that were 2.5 to 3 megawatts in Cape Bridgewater and Warbra in Victoria. These are 6.2 megawatts. And if they didn't obey the law in Victoria, they're not going to here either. It's a really bad track record that they have for being non-compliant and for fraudulently producing their noise compliance reports. The problem that we have is that this industry is supported by every level of government and is not regulated by any level of government. We have that 10, 15-year history in Australia that you can look at that shows exactly that. Whilst it should be being regulated, it isn't, because it's supposedly green and good for the environment. So our public servants aren't doing their job because they believe that this is going to save the environment, when in fact the opposite is true.
Along with the link that you sent me on the ABC reporting about Acciona and this proposed monster of a wind farm in Western Australia, you sent me another link to an interview that Alan Jones had with Senator John Madigan, and they were talking about fraud and corruption exposed, Pacific Hydro and Acciona defrauding the Commonwealth. In particular, there, reading through, just speaking there about the fraud and looking at their reports, pre-construction noise impact assessments, so on and so forth. One was particularly in reference to the Cape Bridgewater wind farm. You know, Alan and Senator John Madigan there have a conversation about the pre-construction reports, and that the compliance, the predicted compliance, couldn't be achieved. Conclusion, and they've talked about here that the developers knew that the wind farm would be operating in breach of its permit unless adjustments were made. And it seems that in the report that came out, those adjustments were made, but in a fraudulent manner.
Exactly. That's exactly right. I'm really glad that you've picked that up from that link. So basically, Pacific Hydro had a noise report done before the wind turbines were built, saying that the wind turbines would not comply with the noise guidelines, the New Zealand noise guidelines. And so it was clear to everyone that the wind farm wouldn't be able to comply with the noise requirements in that area. And then they constructed the wind farm anyway. And in the post construction noise reporting, they had fraudulently, they just bodged the data so that it said what the wind company needed it to say. And basically, the original report had said that they would have to run in noise optimization mode, which they then didn't run in noise optimization mode. And what people don't understand is that, like with Acciona, for example, this is a Spanish company. So those wind turbines are operated from a desktop that is in Europe, for example. Like Acciona is a pretty big company here, so they may run it in Australia. But a lot of times, like with the Italian one that's in Cogena, they'll be running that from a desktop in Europe. So they don't give the staff. If a farmer rings them in Perth, Western Australia, and says, hey, your turbines are too noisy, they need to be switched off, or hey, you're not running in noise optimization mode, they just don't care, because if they put them in noise optimization mode or they turn them off, that's less subsidy.
Alan has said that he's blown the whistle on the corrupt system of these wind farm noise assessments that you were talking about, and that the consultants' commercial arrangements with wind farm operators, Acciona and Pacific Hydro, they'd had adversely impacted the independence of its reports and the legitimacy of its conclusions, because they also go on to talk about, if this was something to do with a union, that this would warrant a royal commission. But because, this is an international company, it's nothing to do with a union, all these sorts of things, it just seems to be allowed to happen with no questions, not concerned that these reports aren't done independently, all these sorts of things. Even
That's
just
correct,
that alone,
yeah.
let alone talk about the environment and the health impacts, and the fact that despite Acciona claiming on all of its promotional videos that it's providing a whole career, a lifelong career for many people in the areas where they install these wind farms, all these sorts of things.
So one of the things the industry does is bangs on about how many jobs it creates. Yes, there are jobs created in the construction. Once it's constructed, you're lucky if you have a site manager. So with 400 turbines, that is an enormous wind farm, and there will definitely be people on site. However, in Cape Bridgewater and Waubra, you're lucky if you've got 1 or 2 people on the permanent payroll. And, you know, one of the people that was on the payroll was a bird kill collector, a dog trainer. Yeah. A dog trainer that comes to the site and sends their dog out to retrieve all the dead birds. That's the kind of thing.
The pictures that people put up on the internet, and I'm sure people have seen them, of the dead birds under wind turbines. I think it's pretty safe to say that that's no lie. If they're employing people with dogs out there to go and retrieve the animals that have been killed by these turbines. So
what happens is the bats fly near the turbines, and because of the air pressure changes, the bats' lungs implode. So the bats die, and then the birds of prey come in to get the dead bats and the dead birds.
And then
that's why you're seeing videos of the big eagles that have been taken out by the turbines.
Absolutely horrifying. From proposing a wind farm, whether it be offshore or onshore, to them being installed and running, every which way you look at it, there's fraud, devastation.
Exactly.
At every step, it seems.
This industry is corrupt to the core, and they have a track record of fraud and corruption, and they have been defrauding the Commonwealth successfully to receive their subsidies that are paid for by every Australian in their electricity bill. We are paying $1,500 a year per household in subsidies to wind farms. It's an enormous amount of money for the average Australian that is battling. You know, like, one of the things that keeps me going is someone told me that their mother was reading their book. This was last winter. Their mother was reading her book in her car because it was warmer than her house.
Oh, no.
These are the kinds of things that we're looking at. There is nothing that is okay about wind farms. They don't work. They require baseload power backup at all times. Wind turbines are incapable of reducing emissions within the electricity grid. They are not green, and they're extremely expensive. This is a rort that began in America with the Enron scandal, and some of those guys are dead. Some of them were sent to jail. There was one lawyer who was on house arrest for 3 years. At the end of that 3 years, he came to Australia and he started National Power, and with his mates at Infigen Energy, they started the wind industry in Australia. So this is the Enron scandal continuing, and now it has come to Western Australia.
And you've mentioned a few more, like Scott River, Geograph Bay. This is, I'm just going to pop up
Kalbarri, Kellerberrin, Hyden.
Yeah, if people look at this map of Western Australia here, you can see down the southwest of Western Australia, they've got a green area there on the coast there. I mean, that essentially, I mean, that's not on purpose, but essentially that green area there will be covered if they go ahead with all their different projects. And it's a few different companies. It's just not the same company. None of them are Australian, by the way. That green area there, that's the area that we're talking about. And that's a huge area of the country.
It's a huge area. So they've been successful in rorting the eastern states and decimating the NEM over there. And now they're coming for us. So we're on a different electrical system to the rest of Australia. The rest of Australia is hooked up on the NEM, the National Electricity Market, where the SWIS, the Southwest Interconnected System. And because they've rorted all of the other states, and the other states are in turmoil now, the first year that South Australia had a big, good proportion of wind connected to the grid, they had 3 statewide blackouts. And now they're coming for Western Australia because it's the only state that they haven't decimated. This couldn't be more of a disaster. These are criminals on our doorstep.
Exactly. You were just talking about that wind turbines aren't green, and I'm sure a lot of people, you know, because we have this climate scam upon us where we want to get to net zero. When I was watching some of the wonderful promotional videos from Acciona, they actually were showing the process of installing a wind turbine. And that was horrifying in itself because they have to build roads, you know, to have access for, you know, all of the getting the stuff in there and all this sorts of stuff. But they showed some drone footage of a turbine that actually had the top off the top of the turbine, and they were talking about the generator. So this was the first time I'd ever seen inside of a turbine, the box part of it, and there's a big honking generator inside the wind turbine. So you just mentioned there about baseload. You reminded me about that drone footage of seeing that generator. Can you talk to people about wind turbines? And you've mentioned the grid there, the fraud, if you like, the trickery, the lies that they're telling people about how these turbines work.
Yeah, so the trick with this is that everyone thinks that they're windmills. They're not windmills. They're industrial power generators that are put really high up in the sky. I think you said that these proposed ones are 220 metres up. Mm-hmm. So you've got an enormous generator that's 220 metres up. And like the stats that I know are about the 2.5 megawatt turbines, not these 6.2 megawatt turbines. But as an example, those 2.5 megawatt turbines have 1,000 litres of gear oil in them, not to mention the hydraulic oil. So when they catch on fire, you basically have these exploding industrial generators in the air, 220 metres up. Now, they can't be fought from the ground. Our fire brigades can't get up there. Mm-hmm. Good luck fighting them from the air because there should be a no-fly zone. Mm. So basically, it's throwing burning pieces of oil and blade basically everywhere. And like these fires aren't an uncommon thing. They are really common. All throughout the world, you can see plenty of videos of the turbines on fire. These are industrial power generators that are 220 metres up in the sky that are basically like good luck trying to fight that fire. And when the fire rips through your neighbour's property, you, the farmer, as the landowner, are liable for damages. This is why the wind company doesn't just buy your farm, which would be the right thing to do, not that they would ever do anything right. They basically pay you a lease on each turbine because you, the farmer, are liable for damages. So you're liable for any damage that's caused by fire, you're liable for noise nuisance, and you're liable for decommissioning. And these foreign companies, a lot of them are $2 companies. I can't say that about Acciona because they do actually have other construction going on in Australia, but that Italian one in Kojonup, that'll be a $2 shell company. And when these companies collapse because they no longer have finance, you're left with the decommissioning. At the moment, they're saying that they have a 20 to 30 year lifespan, but the reality is that it's 10 years or less.
Yeah, that's one of the things I noticed that kept coming up in Acciona's promotional videos is 25 years. That's what they're telling people, and they've got a nice lady that they have speaking about as I mentioned before, the positive impacts for the community and the ongoing employment that they claim that these wind farms provide for the communities. But also she touches on what happens after 25 years, and it's kind of well, it's very successful. We'd like to see them being replaced, installing new ones, all these sorts of things, and blah blah blah. But she only just touches on it and talks about 25 years being the lifespan of these each turbine. So basically that's one generation, right?
If you use Cape Bridgewater as an example, the blades were damaged in high seas, so they put the blades up and they were damaged, so they were broke. They had to bring them back down. It's called component liberation, when the blade breaks off and goes flying through the air. So that was within the first couple of years they had to replace the blades, and then they had installed the wrong size gearbox. That was in the first year, so they had to replace all the gearboxes, because this is an unregulated industry. They just get away with everything. There's no regulation checking on the specs or the operation or any of it. And the other thing that you mentioned was the benefits to the community. So there's some examples I can give you of a community benefit fund. I think it's the Regional Tableland Shire in Queensland. For the Mount Emerald Wind Farm, they are paid $200,000. The community is paid $200,000 per year as a community benefit fund. And the problem with that community benefit fund was that it attempted to gag the community so that they couldn't talk about the problems with wind turbines. So that was $200,000 per year, and that was, I think, 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. There's currently discussion in the Northampton Shire for the proposed Kalbarri wind farm of $1 million per gigawatt as a community benefit fund. So that project is 6 gigawatts. Hopefully it will never go ahead, but that's a possible payment of $6 million per year to the Shire of Northampton. When we're talking about the community benefit funds, it used to be that they would buy a new fire truck for the local fire brigade, or that they would sponsor the local football team. Now we're talking millions of dollars, and it can come with a gagging clause on the community.
I'm just hurt. I mean, it's funny you say $200,000, because that lovely lady that I referred to before that was, hamming up these wind farms also talked about $200,000 for the community and how much, how beneficial it's been. I'm just going to share this article again.
Yeah, that was the Atherton Tablelands community in Queensland.
Because we've got this is the article by the ABC that we started off with. Largest land-based wind farm outside China proposed for southern WA. We've talked about the area a little bit there already, Alex, how large it is. The shires of West Arthur, Williams, Wagen, Narrogin, southeast of Perth. We looked at the map there. I just want to go down to, we've touched on, some of the infrastructure and needing some relationships with energy providers. But it goes on to talk about the locals. And so this is West Arthur Shire President Neil Morrill. And he does say that it's, quote, quite exciting, really, mainly for the people who are going to have wind turbines on their farms. They're going to have a huge increase in income. Well, we've just talked about that there. But there's a couple of other comments that he makes, one of them being that some residents don't realise how big the farms will be. He goes on to talk about here that people looking from the outside are going to have to put up with the sight of them.
Very common distraction is to
Yes.
make the community fight about the view. It's not about the view. The wind turbines don't reduce emissions. This is a scam, and they're rorting Australia. It's not about the view.
Exactly. He does go on to mention about any noise coming from them and the infrastructure leading up to the wind turbines. He also, Mr. Morrill said he was unsure if residents in the region understood the true scale and impact of the project. And then also is quoted saying here, it's going to put the Shire of West Arthur on the map. So I'm not really sure from those quotes there from Neil Morrill his real position, because he is saying, you know, it's going to be exciting for the farmers because they're going to have a huge increase in income. But then he does mention the noise coming from them and the infrastructure leading up to the turbines. So
It's not exciting for the community. It's going to divide the community in half. So the farmers that have sold out and are going to receive lease payments are going to be at loggerheads with the neighbours who are experiencing the health effects. So the Warbra wind farm, as an example, it completely decimated the community. They have been at loggerheads ever since. And what we're really talking about here is it's exciting for the Shire because their community benefit fund could be in the realm of $3 million per year, because they've got 3 gigawatts, this project. And if the Northampton Shire is an example, they're talking about negotiating on $6 million a year for 6 gigawatts. So that's why it would be exciting for the Shire, is if they get a community benefit fund that is $3 million per year. And you've got to remember that this project for Acciona has 400 turbines. So Acciona is getting $400 million per year. The community might negotiate on $3 million per year, and the entire agricultural region is going to be completely decimated. If you think about what has to happen to the roads to get all of those wind turbine blades, so that's 400 turbines have 3 blades each. So we're talking, what is that, 1,200 blades have got to come in, and each blade is 90 metres in length, if I'm correct. Even just the trucks that have to get them in, like, this is enormous. It will completely decimate the entire area. It will not be able to be farmed anymore. You can't continue to farm. Acciona will tell you that you can, you can't, because of the health effects of being near the turbines. If you speak to the people,
the health effects,
if you speak to the people in Warbra, where Acciona have built their wind farm in Victoria, they will talk to you about what's happened in Warbra. And the farmers, basically there is a couple that had to rent a house in the town because they could no longer live at their farm, and they tried to continue working their farm during the day, and they can't because the health effects are so severe. So you've got farmers that are struggling anyway, having to rent another house and drive out to their farm every day to try and continue farming. It's just an absolute disaster zone. And like, if you're a farmer that's considering signing up for these things, A, we can get you out of the contract because of the level of misrepresentation that will be going on when you signed up. B, get on a plane and go to Warbra and see for yourself. And these turbines are only 2.5 megawatts. Imagine what 6.2 megawatts, 400 turbines that are 6.2 megawatts would do.
The low frequency noise, and obviously, like you just mentioned, the increase in size, the low frequency noise is going to increase. What does that do to living organisms, you know, whether you're a farmer living on that land or any of the, if there's any livestock there, or, you know, animals, we touched on birds and stuff. What does that do to a living organism?
It's horrendous. It basically starts to kill you. So essentially, the effects of the noise are on the inner ear, but because this is coupled, the infrasound and the low frequency noise are a known military weapon. So this has been known since the 1980s. It's a similar for everyone that went to the epic protest in Canberra when they turned on the RAD. This is what we're talking about, the same thing, low frequency noise and infrasound. It is a military weapon. So they know that there are health effects. This is knowing harm to humans. And for the animals, there was one farmer that I interviewed in Cape Bridgewater whose Jack Russells died because they were the closest to the ground. So they were the first to go. So the noise couples with the seismic vibration, and depending on the topography and the soil type as to how severe the effects are, but essentially it affects the whole body, affecting the brain stem, dehydrating the hippocampus. It increases the thickness of the blood vessel walls throughout the body, so your blood pressure goes through the roof. And there is like severe sleep disturbance. So you'll be trying to sleep, and then the wind turbines will get to a certain pitch where that pitch is similar to what's used in the fire alarms. So a fire alarm is obviously a really loud audible noise, but there's also a low frequency component to wake people that are deaf. And when the turbines reach that pitch in certain wind conditions and in certain directions, then the entire community wakes up in a startled state. And there are examples of wind farm neighbours that have kept a diary of the time that they've woken up, and when they get together with their other neighbours, they've woken up at the same time, like it's 1:30 a.m, 3 a.m. So they're waking in a startled state, and these low frequency vibrations have a severe chronic effect on the health. And the only thing that you can do is get away from the turbines.
So how is this continuing on? It just seems like, you know, any kind of efforts to highlight this, to expose it, to talk about it, just seems futile sometimes, Alex. How come it keeps going like this?
It's basically like all levels of government don't regulate this industry because they believe that it's green and we're saving the environment. It's not saving the environment, it's completely decimating the environment at enormous cost to Australians. So it's really a public education process. These bureaucrats sitting behind their computers have no idea what the environmental cost is, and they have no idea what the economic cost is. It's a particularly well-hidden scam because it is so complicated, and it began with the Enron scandal. It's extremely complicated. The gaming of the electricity market is wild to try and get your head around. And I'm not talking about the gaming of the market. That's another whole subject. I'm just talking about the scamming that's going on within the wind industry, where they're building these industrial turbines that do not reduce emissions in the electricity grid. They have a capacity factor of 27%. That's the industry's own figure. So that means that of that 6.2 megawatt capacity of the turbine that they have proposed for the southeast of Western Australia, of that 6.2 megawatts, the capacity factor is only 27%. So that 6.2 megawatts is only going to be working 27% of the time, which is 2 days a week, which is one of the things that I try and get everyone to talk about, is they only work 2 days a week. Now, technically, they don't work at all because they're not reducing emissions, but they're only generating 2 days a week because the wind is intermittent and unreliable, and it's very hard to balance the electricity that is generated by wind turbines in the grid. It's what switch operators refer to as dirty electricity. So this is supposed to be clean energy, but it's actually dirty electricity. And the reason that it's dirty is because it comes onto the grid like this. It's intermittent because the wind never blows steadily at a steady rate. So when that electricity hits the grid, they have to be able to keep the grid in balance at all times. It's actually quite delicate. I think it's that it has to be kept at 49.6 DARs, if I remember correctly. And if it's 49.9 or 49.5, then the grid blacks out because all the appliances would blow. So it's really hard to balance the grid, and wind is dirty electricity because it requires base load power to back it up at all times. So they think that they can shut down the Collie power station, but the reality is they will not be able to. We can't build big enough batteries to balance our entire grid.
Well, that was one of the things in the ABC report. They touch a little bit on timing here, and Acciona WA General Manager Jeff Nitch said the project proposed to start construction in 2028, with the wind farm to be one of the largest in the world. They go on to talk about having a plan that they want to reach for 2030. Energy Minister Reece Whitby said he was working on the private sector to develop new sources of renewable energy as it worked to retire all state-owned coal-fired power stations by 2030. So there's that year again, 2030. Seems like some magical number, doesn't it? Some mysterious year. And you've just mentioned Collie there, one of our coal-fired power stations in Western Australia. And that they want to close all of them down. You've just mentioned there that they wouldn't be able to. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think what you'll be talking about is the Paris Agreement for 2030, which is to get our emissions down to a certain percentage. I'm not going to go into the Paris Agreement. What's holding this in place is the Renewable Energy Electricity Act of 2000 and the Renewable Energy Electricity Regulations of 2002. That is the piece of legislation that is holding the subsidy in place. That is the piece of legislation that needs to be scrapped, and we need to scrap it quickly because that is what is supplying the wind industry with the $1 million per turbine per year in subsidy from our electricity bills. And if I can just go into some of the costings. So that Renewable Energy Electricity Act holds in place the issuing of large-scale generation certificates for wind, or LGCs. The retailers have to purchase the certificates or pay a penalty price. So they're currently trading at $45 per megawatt hour, and the penalty price is $60. So basically, unless you buy your LGC at $45, you get fined $60 for every megawatt hour. So currently, there's 33,000 gigawatt hours times $45 is $1.46 billion per year is the subsidy that's going out in LGCs. And then added to that is the ongoing government support of renewables, which is the Clean Energy Finance Corporation at $1.3 billion per year, ARENA at $100 million per year, the 30% safeguard mechanism at $906 million per year, the Clean Energy Regulator at $750 million per year, Our state schemes are over $14 billion and the capacity investment scheme is $10.38 billion per year. These are amounts of money that just make your head spin. And these public servants and bureaucrats that are employed in these government departments, their income relies on them not understanding that this is a scam.
Yeah. Alex, is it also a matter of, particularly, we have not only our oceans under fire with the offshore wind farms proposed, but in prime agricultural land, is it fair to say that we need our farmers to learn more about this and say no?
Very much so. This is a call to arms. We really need our farmers to wake up and start fighting this. Like, they're being impacted by the ban on live export, so that's starting to get people involved in the communities. But this is another attack on farming, and this is a tremendous attack. Like, the live export industry, I think, I can't remember how much it's worth to the state, but it's a significant amount. But that amount is nowhere near the amounts that I've just talked about. And this is a statewide attack on farming. The offshore wind turbines is an attack on fisheries. The aim is to shut down fishing. This is an attack on farmland. The aim is to shut down farming. Yep. There's a farmer that I interviewed in Crookwell in New South Wales who was recording his growth rates in his cattle. And when the turbine switched on, he had a 30% drop in growth rates in his cattle. There's another dairy farmer that I interviewed in Ralgan, but I can't remember exactly where we were, but his dairy farm had been in his family for 5 generations, and as soon as the turbines turned on, his dairy cows no longer would come into the milking shed. They used to bring themselves into the milking shed every morning. Yep. And then as soon as the turbine switched on, they wouldn't come anywhere near the milking building because of the vibration. So this is an attack on farming. No mistake. This is the government attacking farming.
It reminds me of Catherine Austin Fitz, because she has been talking about for many, many years the deliberate attack on our food supply as a way to be able to introduce a food crisis, which then leads on to digital ID, universal basic income, and social credit score. So, and they start with things like food, the food chain, food supply. Yeah. And if they are attacking our fisheries with offshore wind farms and our farming and agriculture with onshore wind farms, I would suggest that would interfere with our food supply.
That is absolutely correct. It's all part of the agenda. Along with the digital ID comes 1 mouthful of meat per person per day is the allowance. We really, really need our farmers to get up and start fighting.
Alex, can you direct people to perhaps being able to access some accurate data or information themselves instead of what we're being shown, what we're presented with that follows a particular narrative? How can people educate themselves?
So there's a great website called Stop These Things. It's www.stopthesethings.com. That's a fantastic website that documents a lot of what I've talked about today. They're doing a great job with that website, and there's a lot of information there. There's a way back link to the Waubra Foundation website, which was a foundation that was set up to bring public awareness to the health effects of wind turbines. There's a lot of information. It's the economic information that is quite hidden. It's all public information. It's just that it's so complicated. Like, I've been doing this for 15 years. So it takes a lot of time to get your head around the way in which the scam works, the way in which the certificates are issued, the way that our electricity system works. There's a yeah, there's a lot of information that you need to get your head around, and Stop These Things is a fantastic website. If you're on Facebook, then please join Save Our Beloved Geograph Bay. We really need your help. There's also a wonderful page called No Wind Turbines Scott River. There's information there that can be shared. And basically, like, this is a scam that is all over the developed countries of the world. So they already have experience with this. In Europe, the public actually has to pay the wind farms not to generate electricity because of the way that the wind destabilizes the grid. So when wind comes on in Europe, the public actually has to pay them not to generate. And those figures are astronomical. I remember reading in Scotland it was like 205 million euros that the public had to pay the wind turbines not to generate that year. So the rest of the world is further ahead. Please speak to your friends over east. They know what's going on because like the eastern states wind farms have been operating for 10 years. And everything that they tell you, remember that that's talking about 2.5 to 3 megawatt turbines. These are going to be 6.2 megawatts. So the problems are already horrific. The wind companies are already defrauding the Commonwealth, and now they're coming to WA with 6.2 megawatt turbines, or in Scott River, it's 7 megawatts. It's absolutely outrageous. They need to be chased out of town. They don't pay their bills. So I would advise anyone not to get into bed with the wind industry. They're parasites and they're coming to scam our state. So please, please bring your community together and start to resist this horrendous invasion.